You are listening to the Mom to Mom podcast, hosted by Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How to Mom. This podcast is meant to empower women and bring the community together through storytelling and education. During these episodes, you will hear stories of triumph, heartache, and hope. You will hear time-tested tips and tricks shared by mamas and women. You will hear a variety of birth stories that will resonate with all birthing families, advice from professionals who have dedicated their teachings to pregnancy, birth, and moms. Here, you will find encouragement, support, and community, because we are your community, and we are so happy to have you. Now, on to today's episode. Hi, you guys. I am so excited about today's episode. It is another powerful birth story from one of How to Mom's clients. And this one is extra special, especially for me, coming from a mom of multiples. Our client and guest speaker today is Sarah, who delivered twins. I can't believe this, over a year ago already. It feels like yesterday. I'm sure how I kind of described my first year with twins. I was like, it went by fast, but it also went by very slowly. So I am so excited to introduce you guys to our guest speaker, who is going to chat with you a little bit about her pregnancy with her twins, decisions that were made through her pregnancy in terms of her birth journey, what that looked like, and how our doula was able to support them not only through the pregnancy, but then through birth and postpartum. So please help me in welcoming Sarah on our podcast today. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
I know. I'm so lucky. I get the best clients, you guys. They all turn into family. And Sarah and I have been able to stay in touch and not only just, connect in terms of motherhood, but really obviously as this special journey unfolded for both of us as twin mamas. And it's been such a joy to not only be able to provide Sarah and her family with support, but to also get support from Sarah when we get on our calls and chat about what life is like with twins. So I am going to let Sarah take it away, let you guys know a little bit of background information about her and her family, and then we'll kind of get into her pregnancy and birth story. So thanks again for being here, Sarah, and your willingness to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, yes. So as Stephanie mentioned, my second pregnancy was a surprise double dose of babies. The plan was to kind of have 2 or 3 children, and we went into this appointment at about 9 weeks, and right away we saw 2 little peanuts up on the screen during our ultrasound, and my husband and I just kind of stared. And it took the tech maybe 30 seconds. And she said, yep, definitely seeing 2 heartbeats, 2 babies. And we just laughed.
I mean, it's a moment you never
We weren't going to say anything. Yes, distinctly remember saying, oh my gosh, I wasn't going to say anything until you said it. And so, some people have very emotional reactions. Some are cursing. And I think we just uncomfortably laughed for a few minutes. And then, everything looked good. We were so happy and just shocked. And I remember we had like a 2-hour window before we had our first OB appointment with the physician who we had for our first daughter's birth. And I remember we saw the nurse and, everyone saying the twin thing. And our provider walked in and she said, oh my gosh, you guys, 2 of them? And we just were like, yep.
So I'm still trying to put all this in. Yeah.
Totally laughed again. And so she sat down with us, and like I said, we were still digesting it. And, we kind of talked about right away, they were able to tell what kind of twins we were having. So we had, the girls are mono-di twins. So they ended up being identical, and they share a placenta, but had different amniotic sacs. And so I still can picture the drawing on my chart that the doctor drew with her little stick figure babies carrying the placenta. Like. Yes. And so Stephanie and I had mentioned, before we became twin moms, we didn't even know that there were different kinds of twins, like fraternal or identical is kind of all you know about. But yeah, mine were, like I said, monodi. So they shared one placenta, but they each had their own sacs.
Well, and what's interesting too, the first time Sarah and I met, and again, like she just said, I had no idea that there were these different variations of twins. Mine are die, so they had different sacs, different placentas, paternal, obviously being boy, girl. But when Sarah and I met, my first question, or like one of my first questions, it was, "Oh, do twins run in your family?" And they do kind of, right?
They do on my husband's side. There are a few sets of fraternal twins.
So I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh," like just in conversation. And then Sarah reminded me, she was like, "Well, actually, identical twins are not hereditary." And so it's really interesting, right? So it can be hereditary that you ovulate more than one egg and then more than one egg
Yeah.
fertilizes, which is why we see an increase in twins when women go through fertility treatment, which is my case, right? So because of medications, I matured and ovulated more than one egg. In Sarah's case, it's like, I mean, every baby's a miracle, but this is such a miracle that happened. So she had one egg fertilized, but it split, right? So now she had these
Right.
two identical babies, and that is not hereditary. That is just like this insane miracle that happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes with identical twins, they can share a placenta and they can share an amniotic sac. Sometimes, like in Sarah's situation, they shared a placenta and they had their own sacs. And so the reason why all of that is important, especially through your pregnancy and your birth journey, is that can create more complexities and more risks potentially for your pregnancy and for your delivery. So that's kind of why we wanted to touch base on that, because that in itself could be its own podcast, just kind of the
Yeah.
complexity.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. So yeah, so
Yeah,
identical.
sure. Yeah, just luck of the draw, I guess. Yes, like you said, knowing it was a twin pregnancy brought along like some expected complications or just a more things at play. And then with the mono die, obviously two babies sharing one placenta where they're getting all their nutrients, all their stuff from was also, a little concerning. And so throughout the pregnancy, we had lots of ultrasounds. I went back and looked at my portal. I think we had 19 ultrasounds and a lot of non-stress tests and a lot of appointments. And what they wanted to do is they really wanted to make sure those fluid levels between the two sacs and the two babies were staying how we expected. And they also always checked that the flow in the umbilical cord, because one of the girls, twin B, was a little bit smaller throughout the pregnancy. And she also had a velamentous cord.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like a really solid connection. So there's a little worry that she wouldn't quite be getting as much of the good stuff as her sister was. So again, a lot of monitoring
is so rare. It's in less than 1% of pregnancies. And so instead of the cord inserting into the meaty part of the placenta, it is not sometimes fully covered by the Wharton's jelly, but also it's kind of attached through the amniotic sac as well. So there's lots of complexities that can come with the velamentous cord.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we've talked, I was looking back at text messages with you, Stephanie, and it was just like such a roller coaster because we would text like every week, here's the update. And it was this baby's, we're a little worried about this. And the next week that was fine. Then the other baby something was going on, but everything evened off at the end and had a little preterm labor-ish stuff at 27 weeks, but was able to keep them cooking. And so we delivered at 34 and 5. We had decided to do a scheduled C-section just with this mono die, the single placenta. We did a lot of research and joined a lot of Facebook groups and decided that was kind of our best option, I think, for us. We wanted a really controlled environment because the pregnancy was a lot of unexpected highs and lows, and we just wanted to go in with our plan. And then it was also a concern with this kind of twins is that after the first baby delivered, there's a chance your body would think, well, you're done, and deliver the placenta, and then you leave the other baby in a very dangerous position. And so we decided right from the get-go, and our physicians were on board and Stephanie were on board, and we just went in, and that was the plan from very early on, and it worked out wonderfully.
And I really want to touch on that a little bit more too before we get into their birthday, which was so amazing. But what Sarah and I chatted about too, right before we jumped on here, as a birth doula, I sit down with clients all the time. And one of the things I often say is there is no right way to birth your baby or your babies. And what I loved so much about Sarah and her husband and the way they came to this conclusion, it was not an easy decision. It wasn't something that they just right away said, okay, yep, that's what the provider is saying. They did research, like she said. They looked at the risks. They looked at the benefits. They chatted about it. There was discussions and we talked about it. And what I love so much is when clients are able to get the information they deserve. They are well educated in knowing what this could look like, what the risks are, what the benefits are of different types of birth with twins. And they were able to make a decision that felt good for both her and her husband. They felt at peace. They felt at ease. It was the decision that they came to. Nobody else could come to that for them. And they were able to say, like, this is what's important to us. This is what aligns with our values. And I just think that's so beautiful because there's no right or wrong way to birth your baby or your babies. And Sarah and her husband were able to come to that conclusion and that decision on their own and just be, they were just really wrapped around with support and like, yes, that's exactly how I want clients to come to that conclusion. And then we talk about, okay, now here's the scenario. Here's how we can provide support. And so I was just so proud of you for taking that time and making that decision, and not to go back too far, but with Sarah's first, she had a vaginal birth. And so this was a bigger decision to consider than just knowing, oh, okay, I would be going for a C-section anyway, if I, unless I was going for a VBAC. And so I just think that's important. And I wanted to touch on that because I just think it's really beautiful when people get to decide how they want to birth their babies.
Yeah. Yep. And then also, came the decision of whether to have a doula or not. I think a common misconception is a lot of people think a doula is just for the birthing process. And while with scheduled C-section, there's not a whole lot of lead up or trying this position, that position. And so that was something my husband and I talked about, and neither of us had had a surgery ever in our lives. So just the thought of going in to an operating room was kind of scary to both of us, and let alone we're having two babies born who likely were going to be smaller and not exactly sure how much assistance they were going to need. And so I was kind of sharing some of these thoughts with my chiropractor who I've known for several years. And she mentioned that, hey, I have this friend who's a doula and she's a twin mom. And we were like, well, check. Let's do that. And so we had a great Zoom meeting and, we're able to go through the process. And like you said, even though we didn't do a lot of birthing practice, but just having that person who's been in the situation is kind of the calming force and just knows what to expect was really, really comforting.
All right, you guys, we are going to take a brief break from today's episode so I can tell you all about one of my favorite companies, Kindred Bravely. They design and sell the best pregnancy and postpartum bras, underwear, sleep, and loungewear. They also have one of my favorite products. It's called the Fourth Trimester Panty. This product is just wonderful because it supplies some security for your postpartum belly, and I really needed that when I was postpartum. But it also is designed and comes with some cooling pads. You can either put them in the freezer to add a little cool touch, or you can put them in the microwave to add some heat, whether you're recovering from a surgical or a vaginal birth. I literally wish I would have had this in my postpartum days, especially when I was recovering from both a vaginal and a surgical birth with my twins. One of my favorite products from them. But please feel free to go to their website, check out all of the amazing products that they offer. You can get to their site by following howtomom.com /links. Follow the Kindred Bravely link. And then at the end of shopping, you can add the promo code HowToMom15 to receive 15% off today. All right, now back to today's episode. Yeah, and just knowing too, like, what are options available to families when they're delivering in the OR, which, by the way, in the Twin Cities, whether you have a vaginal birth or a surgical birth with twins, you're always delivering in the OR. And I think that's kind of news to some people as well. But one thing that I hope was really helpful and important to you is we were able to reach out to the hospital and the staff and get clearance to make sure that I was able to go back with Sarah when they did the spinal for the surgical birth. And so there was never a gap in support. I was able to be there with her well before she was kind of laying down and getting ready for surgery. And just to have that familiar face and somebody that you have that relationship with and you feel really safe with, I feel like that was important. And another thing too, I told people when Brian and I had our twins is it's always difficult, I think, too, for your support person, because all of a sudden their heart is kind of split into two, right? So you have a baby and that support person, dad, spouse, anything like that, they're worried about baby, and they also have their wife or partner, in an OR having a major surgery. So their heart is like in two different places. Now let's throw in another baby. Like dads are like, where am I supposed to be? And so that I think was another big thing too, is like having another person there as well to kind of help with all of that potential situations.
Yeah, definitely. And that was our thought. So originally we had scheduled the C-section for, I think it was like 36 and a half weeks or so. Actually, they called to schedule and it was going to be 2/2/22 for their birthday.
Yes, that's right.
Well, perfect. But then our little baby B was starting to show some growth restriction. And so we kind of got to the point and they said, nope, I think we just need to get her growing better on the outside. And we were all for that. So we delivered 2 weeks earlier than that. And yeah, like you said, we were not sure how everything was going to go. Like I said, I was a little scared about a surgery, and then we wanted someone with the babies too. And my husband definitely, like you said, was going to feel the split. So that worked out wonderfully. But yeah, so the big birthday, they didn't make it to February. But like we said, we had some preterm labor actually at Thanksgiving. Yeah. And so we had about 6 weeks to go. And I just remember it was like, okay, let's make it to December. Perfect. And then make it through Christmas. Okay. And we just wanted 2022 babies. And then we made it to January 18th, which was no early surprises. And we were able to go with our planned scheduled thing. And it was just, couldn't have been a more different delivery than our first, who my water broke 3.5 weeks early with her, and everything moved really quickly. And here it was, we dropped our older off at the daycare in the morning, and I laid on the couch and watched the Today Show for a few hours. And then we drove in with everyone else, the lunchtime rush, and we just kept saying, everyone else is going about their day and we're going to have 2 babies in a few hours. What's going on in the world? Yeah. So we checked in and everything got going, and then we found out shortly after we had got hooked up to the monitors and things, that my OB was in a surgery that was running late. So we got bumped back a little bit, which was fine. And then there was 1 emergency C-section, maybe 2. So we just kept getting bumped back, which we were okay with. We weren't in an emergency situation, so we were just kind of hanging out. I had a nice massage from Stephanie, and my OB came in to hang out with us for a little while, and she also is a twin mom. Her kids are college or older now, so it was just kind of fun, just chatting, hanging out. And I remember she just said, well, I'm just going to hang out until we deliver these babies. Yeah. I got nothing else going on.
Yeah, that was so fun. And just to know that your whole team were these twin mamas, like that had to feel kind of powerful.
Yeah. And then I remember a nurse said, okay, you're next. I think we're going to get the plan. And then the nurse anesthetist just came in and he was like, all right, let's do this. I was like, okay. I think I just texted my parents to say like, oh, we're going to get going soon here. Just got bumped behind. And he just came in and was like, all right, let's rock and roll. And I was like, okay.
It's like, hurry up and wait. And then boom, it took off.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I was looking back and that I was refreshing my memory on things. And I think that text to my family was at 4:25 or 4:30 or so. And the girls were born at 5:09. And so
Wow.
from we walked out of the room, it was about 40 minutes until they were born.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think a lot of people that have not been a part of a surgical birth or have had a surgical birth, how quickly they get to baby. A lot of that surgery is actually after baby is born. The longer version of that part of surgery, but the beginning, like a lot of times people don't realize how fast they're going to meet their babies as soon or baby as soon as they get back to the OR.
Yeah. Yep. And so it was just so surreal walking in, it was like an 80s green is what the ambiance was. And it was just, I don't even know, 8-10 people standing around maybe. And I felt like a celebrity, like, I'm here now, let's do it.
Yes. The stars party is here.
I know. I was like,
it is a lot busier in the OR. And that's why it was so, important to talk with the staff well before we showed up that day, because that particular hospital, they do have a little bit smaller OR rooms. They have since remodeled. And so now they have it where if babies go right to the warmer, there's a camera. And so moms are able to kind of watch, which that's a really great, cool upgrade, I believe. But it is a whole different party when you're expecting multiples, because there are 2 nurses per baby. So right there, you have 4 nurses, plus you usually have 2 nurses, plus the provider. And so it definitely does feel like a big party, big birthday party.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just remember they, were kind of prepping me, and my husband came in and we chatted for a minute. And then I think I then was like, wait, did we get started yet? And Stephanie, you were like, yeah, you're going to have a baby in a minute or 2. And I was like, didn't even know that they had started going. And so that was something we had talked about after the fact. My husband, he probably was in for a couple of minutes and there was a baby, and he thought it would have a little bit more time to get settled. And so that was a little shock factor for him.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But then they got started, and it was originally, I didn't want to see, I'm a little squeamish, but then in the 11th hour, my doctor said, do you want to do a mirror? I said, yes. And it was so cool. It was not nearly as icky as I thought it was going to be. And I just, all of a sudden, she just kind of reached in and there was a baby. And I still remember she said, oh, I think this was the chunkier one. And the chunkier one was 5 pounds, 1 ounce. And the little one was 4 pounds, 1 ounce. And they were both bigger than.
I was going to say, which we were all very pleasantly and happy, pleasantly surprised and happy to learn of their weights, because they were a little bit bigger than what we were anticipating.
Yeah. Yeah. We were hoping for 4-pounders is that was the goal. And so they both came out crying and full heads of hair like their big sister. And they took them back for a few minutes and got them cleaned up. And my husband and Stephanie were able to go back and snap some pictures. And then all of a sudden we saw one coming out. It's like, oh my gosh. And so they kind of laid her next to me on one side. And then I just remember glancing over and there was the other one. I don't know why I had expected like one at a time they would come over, but no, all of a sudden there's just one on each shoulder, and it was crazy.
All of a sudden you're this twin mom, right? And there's 2.
Yeah.
There's always 2.
Hey guys, it's Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How To Mom. I'm just interrupting today's episode to make sure you are well aware of all that How To Mom offers. We, of course, are a community and a support group for all moms at all stages of life, but we also offer a large variety of services that I wanted to make sure you are well aware of. We offer birth doula services, both in person or online support. We have birth support groups with different birth packages to choose from. We also provide placenta encapsulation services, lactation services from our lactation counselors. We also offer postpartum services, birth planning assistance, belly casting. We have a registered dietitian, nutritionist. We also offer a variety of photography services from birth, newborn, and family packages. We truly have it all here at How To Mom. So please don't hesitate to reach out today to have a free consult and help us find the best way to support you in your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Now back to today's episode.
Yes.
And remind me too, I could be wrong about this, but I remember being surprised or interested in learning that they actually delivered twin B first, correct?
No, it was twin A.
It was twin A. Okay, we had talked
It
about
was.
that a couple times, right? Of who was presenting.
Yeah, and I'm glad that she did come out. It's very confusing because they were A and B for 9 months, but if twin B came out first, she would actually become, and then they switched to numbers in the hospital, so it was actually baby girl 1 and baby girl 2.
Yes.
So it would have really thrown us for a loop if baby A became baby 2. So,
Well, and so
they came out just as they were supposed to.
And as a doula who supports families that have multiples, whether it's twins or triplets, I'm very careful about making sure we have proper folders in our phone and in our albums to make sure that we're taking, because as a twin mom, that's important to me too, right? And obviously I didn't have the identical situation, but wanting to know, like, what baby is that was just born? And so that can get a little bit sticky, but that's important. It was important to me, and it's important to a lot of my clients, of having pictures of delivery and me going, okay, that's ABA, that's baby B. Okay, I just took pictures of baby B, put those in that folder, like, just so that for your guys' baby books or whatever, memories and things like that can always be a little bit tricky, but that's just a look into like what twin mom motherhood looks like. It's very
right. And that's just a little glimmer of the very beginning.
Yes. And I just want to tell our listeners to, just like, having the support back there in the OR with you during your spinal tap, there are other things, obviously, like when you're waiting to go back to the OR, having somebody there, a listening ear, a hand to hold, massage, relaxation techniques to kind of calm those nerves, right? We can't eliminate them because what we're about to do is pretty massive, but just being able to try and be as calm and in the moment as possible. But I feel like something that helped you when we were back in the OR, whether it was through the spinal tap or during the actual procedure, we did bring back essential oils. And I hope, and the goal was that would really help you kind of not only with just like potential nausea through that procedure, but also kind of ground you, bring us back, kind of have this focal point, remembering to have our breath. Did you remember that? Do you feel like that was helpful?
Yeah, I do. And you had a handful of different scents. And I remember in our room, I picked out what I liked the best. And you were smart and brought a few because I think when they started that medication, I did start feeling nauseous. And the smell of that one that I loved did not work anymore. So then you pulled something out and it was way better. And yeah, definitely mind over matter. And then also, I think that essential oil really, really did help kind of keep things calm. And I still tell my husband, I was like, you were holding it. And that was a very important job that you had throughout the whole thing.
Well,
yes.
To your spouse as well, not only have a job, right, and feel like they're this active participant, they're making a difference, but it also keeps them grounded and focused as well, and not kind of feeling, like they're floating and they're not quite sure what to do. And so I know that was really important too, and it just empowers them to have this job and to feel like they're actually able to help in a otherwise situation where they maybe feel like helpless.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Yeah. So So that was really helpful. And then, like I said, once they were born, it was just kind of crazy for a little while. And then, yeah, so that was at 5:10. And then I think I got back to my room about 6:30. And so the second half of the surgery is much longer. And I think I definitely was getting a little anxious, and you start getting the shakes after you have that huge hormone drop in your body. And so that was, and the adrenaline was leading up to the surgery. And once the babies were out and healthy, it was kind of like, get me out of here. I'm ready to be done laying on this table and being worked on. So that was probably the most challenging part of the surgery, I think, was staying calm during that last, getting to the finish line, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And I think too, what other fellow NICU moms and or moms of multiples can relate to is it is really challenging to be separated from these babies that you have just worked so hard on growing and then birthing, and knowing that they needed that support and that was the best place for them at the time, but also being anxious to go, okay, now I need to not only focus on myself and my recovery, but I want to get to a place where I can go and see my babies again.
Right. Yeah. So we got back to the room, and I remember we got back. It must have been just before 6:30 because we got back, and the nurse said, "Quick, the kitchen is closing. You need to order dinner," because I was starving all day. And so it was the best turkey sandwich I've had in 9 months.
You will never find
No. So then we just kind of settled, and I had pretty significant shakes. So for a couple hours, it was just warm blanket after warm blanket and just trying to relax for a little bit. And the girls were doing well. They didn't need oxygen or anything. They ended up doing some feeding tubes, just they were so little, they weren't quite sure how to eat yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it was about 9 o'clock that night, I was able to get rolled down, and they each got to be put on my chest and get some snuggles. And it was just wild.
Absolutely.
They were just so little.
So little, yet so strong, just like you,
Yes.
and just fought like hell and gained weight and just exceeded everybody's expectations with when they would be home with you guys. I had the absolute honor and pleasure of being able to come over for a postpartum visit and hold those babies with you guys. I have since visited again, watching them sit up and play and laugh and smile.
Yeah.
And the great thing about hiring a birth doula or just having support in general is it's going to look different for every single family and even every single pregnancy and birth. But the support is always there. And so that's what's so beautiful about having this intimate personal relationship with somebody is it's that consistency. It's that familiar face. It's so customizable around what you and your husband desired and the support that was important to you. And then of course, just now feeling like, we're great friends and have this relationship and this bond over being moms of twins has just been such a joy. And I'm so thankful to Dr. Cassie for connecting us. And
Yes.
I hope that you felt supported through your entire pregnancy, birth journey, and postpartum. And I'm so proud of all of you for this last year, 2 years now since conceiving.
Yeah.
Because it's no easy journey, and there's a lot of joys and there's a lot of peaks, but there's also a lot of valleys and there's a lot of hardships that come with caring for 2 babies at the same time, plus
Right.
your older child. So is there anything that you would like to add to our listeners, or any last piece of advice you would like to give as a mom of 3 or a mom of twins, or just being a badass?
Well, all right, I'll take that.
Yeah.
No, I think I had mentioned earlier talking about how, when you have a scheduled surgical birth, you don't have that like birthing, laboring time, where a doula really can shine and do their thing. But just having that connection from when we first met and all through that pregnancy, you were kind of like a therapist to us. Like that was kind of a weekly check-in that just kind of kept all of our emotions even keeled. So I think that was for us in this position even more powerful than that, that day of birth, just having that connection and just that reassuring voice on the other end of the phone, just to say, yep, that's what it is. Let's see what happens next week. And, the babies are strong. Like you had mentioned, you are strong. And so just that little voice for us, I think really made all the difference in a pregnancy that was challenging.
Yeah. So many ups and downs, right? And just this roller coaster ride, and just wanting to get to the finish line and having, and have your 2 healthy babies at home in your arms. That's, and I think too, one thing that I want to leave the listeners with that I feel like it was very important to me as a twin mom, and I love that you mentioned it as well, is because we have this risk of preterm labor or delivering babies that are too small or not quite mature enough, it almost felt impossible when I was 26 weeks and essentially presenting full term for like a singleton pregnancy. This thought of, how am I going to make another 10 weeks? How am I going to do this physically for another 10 weeks? Felt so daunting and overwhelming. And my husband actually gave me this advice, and you and I may have talked about it, but I loved what you did kind of starting at Thanksgiving and then through their birth, was instead of going, I have to make this 10 more, make it 10 more weeks, or I have to make this, make it all the way to February, you broke it down. And that's something we often advise even in labor, right? Instead of looking about, okay, I have to go from 0 to 10 centimeters. It's okay. Let's just break it down. Let's make it another week. Okay, awesome. I made it another week. Let's celebrate. Now I'm going to make it another week, or how you did it. Let's get to Christmas. Okay, we want to have babies in 2022 and not in 2021. And just having these smaller milestones feel much more achievable than going, okay, I have to carry these babies until 32 weeks at minimum. And then all of a sudden that feels, overwhelming. And so I love that you mentioned that. And I think that's a huge piece of advice that I would give any mom, but specifically moms of multiples.
Yeah. And I'll add to that. So our Thursday was our new week. So every Thursday when we made it, we treated ourselves, if you're local in the Twin Cities listening, a Lunds and Byerly's fancy dessert. That was always our Thursday night treat. So we made it another week, and my husband would come home from work with a little dessert for us to have after our older went to bed. And it worked for 6 weeks. So
exactly. And I feel like it almost turns into this like superstitious, like we have to do it because it got us through last week. So we would go. And
so a year later, we're still having to, no, we aren't.
Well, you should. Well, thank you all so much for listening today. I know that you have taken a lot of wisdom away from listening to this episode, not only about how doulas can support all different types of birth, but if you are a twin mama or a mom of multiple, or even a NICU mama, hopefully you can relate to some of what Sarah talked about, the hardships, the joys, and just the twists and turns kind of that pregnancy and birth can bring for moms of multiples. It's a whole different ballgame. Sarah, thank you so much for sharing. I know it is a vulnerable topic and it's intimate and it's your story, but you sharing has helped inspire so many others in how they, should expect certain support through their pregnancy and birth journey. So thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you.
All right, you guys, we will talk to you on our next episode. Have a great day.
All right, you guys, that is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. If so, please subscribe to our podcast, comment, share, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen, and we will see you next time.